Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Thank you so much for dropping by this, whether you're part of the live broadcast or whether you've come by afterwards and are watching the recording of it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, forever loving everything. So, this topic is very near and dear to my heart. Welcome, Claudie. The topic of grace. Bruno Groening had some very interesting things to say about it, and so I'm very excited to be sharing this topic with all of you. First, though, before we dive too deeply into words, let's receive some grace. Let's take in the energy of grace. Doing this is very simple. Please sit with your legs uncrossed, feet flat on the floor, hands on your legs, palms facing upwards. Sit as best you can with a straight back, not too stiff, but also not slouched over. If possible, not leaning against your chair. And if you need to, that's okay. When I first started this practice, I needed to lean against my chair. So that's the physical preparation. And then the internal preparation is to open ourselves up to divine energy, to healing energy, to the possibility that there is an energy that can help and heal. Welcome, Ross. And then please close your eyes and inwardly either say a prayer to receive this divine energy or just open your heart and soul to receive the good from the divine, from God. And then please welcome the peaceful quiet. This is a quote of Bruno Groening's for How to Do Einstein. He said, welcome the peaceful quiet and observe your body, having the will to receive positive energy. So let's do that now. Welcoming peaceful quiet and observing our bodies with the intention to take in this good energy. We can always ask Bruno to help us receive this energy. Noticing what you feel, observing the body. Letting go of negative thoughts. Continuing to take in the good, to engage our will to take in the good. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for joining in. So, grace. So, Bruno did never use the word grace because he didn't speak English. He did use the German word Gnade. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hmm. And Gnade, one of the meanings is grace, one of them is forgiveness, one of them is mercy, blessing. A friend of mine who's German described it that it's the kind of thing, it's also the term if you were to go before um, a judge and you're convicted of a crime and yet you don't have to serve the sentence. Um, a release from a debt is one of the meanings of the word nade. So, on a very simple, practical level, Bruno Groening offered this grace or forgiveness, or he offered to help us with it. And here's a quote from Bruno. If I put the question to you, who will give me his worries? Who will give me his suffering? Throw them off and receive something new. See to it now that you receive health, meaning that which is new. Throw off the dirt and receive health. And don't think about the illness. So, again, the very beginning. If I put the question to you, who will give me his worries? Who will give me his suffering? Bruno Groening said he was willing to take on illnesses, burdens, worries, and suffering. It's a very generous, gracious offer. Now, to anyone new to this path or who hasn't done that, I invite you to do it. When I first heard about it, I thought it was crazy. Who is this Bruno Groening person who isn't even in a body who I can just give my illnesses to and who will take them? It didn't make any sense to me. But I was willing to try it. And I've experienced many healings because of that openness to try, that willingness to try. So please, let's right here, right now, hand over our burdens and our worries to Bruno Groening, who said he would bear them for us. Entrusting them to him and entrusting ourselves to him, to Bruno. Now the question may arise, but how is this, what does this have to do with grace? Like, this illness just happened to me. It's not my fault. Well, Bruno Groening begs to differ. He was very adamant that we reap what we sow, and that he said, I can't remember the exact quote, but in essence, he said that we are the ones who bring our problems and our burdens onto us, either through misdeeds in this life or misdeeds in a previous life. In fact, here's a quote of Bruno's that really lays that out. And this is from the book Powers of the Spirit, which I highly recommend. And this is page 147. Everyone must, for as long as they do not walk the path of nonviolence, experience and carry to term in their own bodies everything they have caused or done to other people by way of evil. That's just one sentence, but wow. I'm going to read it again. Everyone must, for as long as they do not walk the path of nonviolence and experience and carry to terms in their own bodies everything they have caused or done to other people by way of evil. So until we're walking the path of nonviolence, which we'll look at in a moment, Bruno said in essence is the path of Christ, or applying the teachings of Christ. all the evil, all the bad we've done to others, we're going to have to experience in our own bodies. So I'll share a little bit more about this, or I'll read another quote of Bruno's that really clarifies this. This is from Powers of the Spirit, page 202. If a person or a group of people are traveling the wrong path, or have traveled it, and they want to turn around because they have now convinced themselves of the truth, they must then, in accordance with the law of cause and effect, first of all go back to the place where they left the right path, the divine one. So, if, for example, as a result of the lures and seductions of the evil side, someone has believed in or done what is not right for 20 years, they must then, despite their present goodwill, go back for just as long a time. And so another 20 years, right back to their former abandoning of the path, so that they can then walk the right path for the first time. This then is what the harsh law demands, as long as the effects of spiritual love, which is what first made forgiving and forgetting possible, is not yet active. Therefore, the teachings of Christ, however, which we must all eventually put into practice, through the teachings of Christ, however, which we must all eventually put into practice, the discharge of guilt goes much, much quicker. So, Bruno calls it the harsh law, the law of cause and effect. He gives an example. If you walk down the wrong path for 20 years, you have to turn around and for 20 years walk backwards just to get back to the point where you left the good path, much less make progress, according to what he calls the harsh law or the law of cause and effect. In the East, they call it the law of karma. You you put out 10 pounds of negative energy, you get 10 pounds back. Very simple in essence. However, Bruno says there is a way to rise above this. And this is what Nade is: mercy, forgiveness of a debt. He calls it the discharge of guilt. Can go much, much more quickly when spiritual love is activated, when through the acts of forgiving and forgetting, and through the teachings of Christ. So we'll talk a little bit more, we'll read a little more in a moment what that means, but let's take a few minutes and really, really percolate on all this. Percolate, that's a big English word. Really reflect deeply on all of this. The idea of the harsh law of cause and effect, and that whatever we put out, we're going to get back unless we activate the teachings of Christ, or unless we seek grace and mercy. Let's spend a little time reflecting on all this while we take in the good energy. So Bruno's given this example of needing to, if we're on the wrong path for 20 years, we have to walk backwards 20 years to get onto the good path without grace. And so now let's look again at the first thing we read. And I think it'll make a little more sense now. Everyone must, for as long as they do not walk the path of nonviolence, and experience and carry to term in their own body everything they have caused or done to other people by way of evil. So if I harm someone, some way, somehow, I'm going to be harmed back. And as Bruno said, experience that in my own body. Until we walk the path of nonviolence, until we seek grace. Now, Bruno has a little more to say about how profound this is. And this is also on Powers of the Spirit, bottom of page 202. Yes, if a person really lets go, it can happen the very next moment, but that is a spiritual healing and always the grace of God. Do you now have some idea of what Christ has really done for human beings and what he means for us all? Yes, for the whole world. But those present here cannot grasp this all-encompassing reality. Otherwise, they would not be sitting around here with such sad faces and gloomy thoughts. So he calls this an all-encompassing reality, and specifically, he says it's connected to both the teachings and the person of Christ. I can't say much more than that, and this is what Bruno said, and invite each of us to reflect on it. That this teaching he's offering, he calls it an all-encompassing reality. I don't claim to fully understand it. What I know is every time I read this and reflect on it, I feel deeply happy. So maybe I'm just beginning to scratch the surface of what Bruno is trying to convey. So I'll read it again, and then let's really sit with it. Yes, if a person really lets go, this can happen in the very next moment. But this is a spiritual healing and always the grace of God. Do you now have some idea of what Christ has really done for human beings and what he means for us all? Yes, for the whole world. But those present here cannot grasp this all-encompassing reality. Otherwise, they would not be sitting around here with such sad faces and gloomy thoughts. So, from a religious point of view, Christ is called, in the Christian tradition, the Savior of the world. As I read this, I believe Bruno Groening is giving us a spiritual explanation of why that term might have some truth to it. Not necessarily from a religious perspective, but from a spiritual perspective in terms of the law of cause and effect and Christ's capacity to extend grace, to help us on the way, to help us save time. Bruno talks about that the discharge of guilt goes much, much more quickly. So let's really sit with this. Please don't take my word for it. Feels like such a profound, sacred mystery. It's a teaching, but also pointing to a profound, sacred mystery. Really listen inside yourself and please draw your own conclusions. So let's spend a little more time in silence, asking to understand this all-encompassing reality. So Bruno once said, I'll say it in German and then in English for our German speakers out there. He said, Bitten Sie würdig Gott um dies sein Gnade, dass sie von dem Bossen erlöste wird. He said, plead, beg, ask, not really ask, more like plead or beg God for his mercy, grace, pardon, that you may be freed from all evil. And here's where we can tie all of this together. If we're experiencing evil, it's because we've done evil. It's, in Eastern culture, it's just in Eastern cultures, it's just a fundamental idea, what they call the law of karma. They also call it the law of cause and effect, as did Bruno. What goes around comes around. Bruno expressed it as did Christ. You reap what you sow. So if we're experiencing things, we don't negative things. We don't need to judge ourselves and say I'm a bad person. No, that's the exact opposite of what Bruno Groening taught. But we do need to recognize that we've done harm, and that's why we plead for mercy and grace. Because according to Bruno, and again, you find almost the exact teaching in Eastern culture: if you do harm, you're going to experience harm. Well, we've all done harm, and so we're asking for forgiveness. But this only works if we're committed to walking the good path. Otherwise, Bruno Groening said, with one word, I could heal every person in this city, but wouldn't that be a tragedy? Because they would just go out and do more evil. So to receive a healing, we have to really firmly separate ourselves from evil and determine to walk the good path. Otherwise, God's probably not going to be gracious to us because we'll be healed and then we'll be more able to go out and just do more evil. So it's a beautiful prayer to both ask for, plead for forgiveness, and also really determined to walk the good path, the right path, and to, as Bruno Groening said, turn around to really walk a new walk. So I'd like to thank everyone for dropping by, everyone who dropped by live, and everyone who's watching the recording of this. And if you'd like more information about the work I do, or if you're perchance new to the work of Bruno Groening, please drop by my website, www.thehealingstream.org. And I currently do these meetings regularly on YouTube, so feel free to subscribe or to drop back by and see when the next live broadcast is. So let's close with a few minutes of, let's take a look at all the different things we looked at today. So first and foremost, on the simplest level, we can hand our burdens over to Bruno. And if we think about them, that means we've taken it back and we need to hand it over again. Next, Bruno Groening spoke about if you do harm, you're going to experience harm in your own body until you walk the path of nonviolence, until we follow the teachings of Christ, which he spoke of. A huge part of that is forgiving and forgetting and true spiritual love. And that there is an unspeakable grace available to us, both in the teaching and, if I'm understanding correctly, in the person of Christ. And we need to be mindful that in asking for grace, that we're literally asking for forgiveness of a debt. If I sit here and say, please, God, grace, if we ask for a healing, in essence, what I'm doing is like, I have done evil and I have done harm. Please forgive me of the consequences of that. So for that to work, we have to be willing. We have to have a contrite heart, meaning feel repentance and sorrow, and be very determined to not do evil more. Otherwise, it's like me saying, without that, it's like me saying, hey, um, I did this evil. Please free me from the consequences of it, and I'm just going to go do more. It doesn't work that way, and it doesn't make sense. So let's be really clear when we're asking for healing, what we're really asking for is forgiveness of a debt, given that illness is just a consequence. It's not a meaningless happening. It's us experiencing in our own bodies harm that we've done in the past. So let's spend a little time percolating on all this. Percolate. Let's spend a little time reflecting on all this. Bruno Groening described Jesus Christ as the supreme spiritual healer and humanity's greatest friend. And maybe that's more just a simple way to think about it, that Christ offers so much help to everyone. And if we want to contemplate a little bit the deeper meanings of what that help looks like, we can read and reflect on the section I read. Bruno said he was only able to help those who had belief in the good or were willing to take it up. And I believe he also said, and walk a good path. And this is why, because these healings aren't just healings. They're forgiveness of a debt. They're release from the consequence of negative things we've done. So thank you so much to everyone for joining in. I wish you a day full of faith and trust and filling yourself up with good energy and then going out and doing good. And seeking grace. And then doing the things that are necessary to receive grace, meaning committing to the good path. Bruno once said, when the human being regrets, that's when God forgives. I'm having to paraphrase, but that's yes. So regretting the things that we've done, determining to do better, and then asking for forgiveness. Thank you so much for joining in. Take care. You're very welcome, Claudia. Much love.